Namaskar, Nilesh Oak here, and welcome back to the course on Introduction to Indian Calendar. In this module, we are going to understand why Adhika masa, also known as intercalary month or an extra lunar month that is inserted into the Indian lunisolar calendar, why it is done, what purpose it serves, and what are some of the consequences of this insertion of Adhika masa. Let's begin with this demo simulator. The position of the moon and the sun are together, so it is a day of Amavasya. The nakshatra is Uttara Bhadrapada. Recall the time taken by sun to go around the earth is about 365 days, and the time taken by the moon to go through 12 lunations or 12 complete rotations from say Amavasya to Amavasya that constitutes the lunar year accounts for or amounts to about 354 days. So that leaves a gap of about 10 to 11 days between a lunar year and a solar year. So once I demonstrate to you the position of the full moon and how we use that to designate the name for the lunar month, we will fast forward and we will jump with a number of 354 days, which is to say, we'll jump from one lunar year to the next and demonstrate what happens to the position of the full moon with respect to the background nakshatra. And if we do not insert this Adhika masa, which is essentially a correction to bring the lunar calendar in synchronicity with the solar calendar, and it has some additional purposes, which I will also describe. Also recall what I said in module 1. By this time, you must have all the names of nakshatras, their sequence by heart, all the names of the solar months, naturally from the Gregorian calendar, such as January through December, but also from the Indian solar calendar, from Madhu Madhav all the way to Tapa Tapasya. You should also have the names of the Indian lunar months by heart, beginning with Chaitra and ending with Falgun. So let's go in steps of one day each. So Pratipada, Dvitiya, Tritiya, Chaturthi, Panchami, Shashti, Saptami, Ashtami, Navami, Dashmi, Ekadashi, Dwadashi, Trayodashi, Chaturdashi, and Purnima. Note down the nakshatra of the full moon. If you draw a straight line from the moon, from the earth, going through the moon, extending all the way to the background nakshatra system, you will notice that the full moon is near nakshatra Chitra. Recall how the names of the lunar months in Indian calendar system were designated. They were based on the nakshatra of the full moon. So in this case, this particular lunar month would be designated as Chaitra Masa or full moon of Chaitra. Pardon me, the lunar month of Chaitra. Let me just complete this until we get to the next Amavasya. So this is the end of the Chaitra Masa. And then we will go through another round, notice the nakshatra of the full moon, and make use of that to designate the name for the lunar month. For example, when I stop here, the nakshatra of the next full moon here is Vishakha, and therefore we will designate that lunar month as Vaishakha Masa or lunar month of Vaishak. We will go through this and complete one lunar year of 12 lunar months, 12 lunations. That should amount to approximately 354 days. So I am fast forwarding to that 354th day. That day should be the day of Amavasya if we had began the year with Amavasya. Okay, so I might add just one day. Actually, I'm going to take it back. The closest point would be actually this. It's a day of Amavasya and one lunar year is complete. Notice the solar year is not complete yet. Sun has to travel through some additional distance to get to the point of vernal equinox. That's fine. In fact, we can estimate what this gap would be. I'm going to give you the answer. See if you can guess the correct answer before I state it when you're watching this video. That number should be close to 10 to 11 days. Just as a demonstration, I'm going to show this to you. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now let's just continue. And the second lunar year has already begun. The second solar year just began. But again, our focus is on the lunar year. So when I get to the next full moon, because now I have gone through all the 12 lunar months, I am going to call this next lunar month. It is the first lunar month of the next year. I'm going to call it Chaitra. That's fine. Notice the position of the full moon. It's no longer near Nakshatra Chitra, but rather it is close to Nakshatra Hasta. Okay. So that we will still call it lunar month of Chaitra, and that's reasonably fine. So what does that tell us? We note down the nakshatra of the full moon, and usually the name of that lunar month is from one of the few nakshatras in the vicinity of that full moon. So let's say plus minus 1, 2 nakshatra. Just for safety, we will just say plus minus 2 nakshatra. That gives us a nakshatra space of about 4 nakshatras. Right? And that's approximately 50 degrees or so. I'm going to fast forward and let's go to the end of the second lunar year. That's 354 days times 2. So 708 days. Notice I need to make a small correction. Okay, so I'm going to go one extra day, and now my moon is in alignment with the earth and the sun, and it's the day of Amavasya. Why did I need to make that additional correction? Because remember, all these numbers are approximate. When I say 354 days, it's actually 354 days and some fraction, and so on. This is the end of year 2 of the lunar calendar. So let us see the position of the full moon of the first month of the new lunar year. So if I go around and stop the position of the moon at the full moon, because 24 lunar months have gone by, 2 years, I'm going to call this particular lunar month as again month of Chaitra. Remember, there are 12 months: Chaitra, Vaishak, Jyeshta, Ashad, Shravan, Bhadrapad, Ashwin, Kartik, Margashirsha, Paush, Magh, and Falgun. So I am going to designate this as a lunar month of Chaitra. However, notice the position of the full moon. It is between Uttara Falguni and Hasta. What happens if I go forward by another year? So if I fast forward to total of 3 years, Okay, so that's 354 times 3. So that takes me to 1062. I'm going to make that small correction of 1 day. Now I am at the day of Amavasya. 3 lunar years are complete. So the sequence of 12 months is already been utilized. So now when I get to this new moon, sorry, this full moon for the first lunar month of the new lunar year, that is the lunar year number 4, guess what? By using the standard formula, I am going to designate it as the Chaitra Masa or lunar month of Chaitra. But notice the position of the full moon. It is between Uttara Falguni and Purva Falguni. Let's go to the end of the year 4. This is the end of the lunar year. So 354 times 4, that amounts to 1416 days. I'll make a small correction for that fractional part. And now this is the end of the 4th lunar year. Again, we have made use of all the 12 names for the lunar months. So when the new year begins and the first full moon arrives, by this standard practice, I am going to designate it, name it as Chaitra Masa or lunar month of Chaitra. But again, notice the position of the full moon with respect to the background nakshatra system. It is between Magha and Purva Falguni. This should startle you. This should make you think something is not going right. Because remember, there is also a lunar month of Falgun. So we are towards the early part of lunar month of Falgun, and we are forced to still call this month the lunar month of Chaitra. So if we want to go to the end of the 5th lunar year, that would amount to 354 days times 5. That comes to 1770 days. We'll make that small required correction. And this is the end of the 5th lunar year. Notice this solar year is already out of sync, because when the 5th lunar year is ending, the solar year still has significant time, whichever that year is, to complete its full rotation from vernal equinox to vernal equinox. But we have a bigger problem. Now, let us say I begin with the year number 6, lunar year number 6, and I note down the position of the full moon. Okay, somewhere here. Look what happened. By standard practice, I ought to be calling this lunar month the Chaitra Masa or lunar month of Chaitra, but guess what? The full moon is near Nakshatra Magha. Now, Magha is also another lunar month, just like Falgun is, and just like Chaitra is in Vaishakhi. Something is terribly wrong. We know exactly why that is so, right? Because the position of the full moon, also Amavasya, is determined by the relative position of the sun. Sun has a different cycle, that is of 365 days. The moon has a different cycle of what? 29.53 days to complete one rotation and 354 days to complete 12 rotations. So unless we make a correction to this calendar, very soon, and we did not have to go actually as far as 5 years. I just did it to show you, demonstrate to you, and make it very obvious to anyone who might not have understood otherwise, that this system of 12 lunar months from Chaitra to Falgun will not work. and it will not adjust, it will not synchronize with what actually you see in the sky. Because on this day, if somebody watches the sky, the full moon in the sky, it would be near Nakshatra Magha. And by this simple formula, we are still expected to call this lunar month of Chaitra. That defeats the whole purpose of using moon as a guiding light for us to measure a specific day, to designate a specific day, to designate a specific lunar month, and the calendar would not have any useful purpose. For this reason, a Adhika masa is inserted. How does that work? Let's reset this whole thing. If you had noticed that the first year went by reasonably well, the second year was also all right. What I mean by that is the position of the full moon and the corresponding nakshatra was within the vicinity of the name of the lunar month that we use, such as Chaitra, Vaishak, Jyeshta, Ashad. However, once we go beyond three lunar years, there is a disengagement, misalignment between the name we are giving it to the lunar month versus the nakshatra of the full moon. So what that means is about every 3 years, or on an average, every 2.5 years, we have to insert one Adhika masa. And that actually solves the problem. Now, how to insert this Adhika masa is a totally different subject. And before we get there, as a homework to prepare to understand this method of insertion of Adhika masa that was designed by a brilliant Indian astronomer about 1,000 years ago named Sripati. What I would like you to do is access Indian solar calendar. You can do this online or whatever works for you. Go back to about 10 years so that everyone is on the same page. How about we begin this on 1st January 2010. What I would like you to do is note down the year and note down the sequence of Indian lunar month, such as Chaitra, Vaishak, Jyeshta, Ashad, Shravan, and note down when the Adhika masa is inserted. Note down when it was inserted, but also the lunar name of that Adhika masa. And do this for the next 10 years. So beginning with 1st January 2010 until, let's say, 1st January 2020. Post your answers in the comments to this video. And in the future modules, we will start looking at the beautiful method designed in Indian astronomy that has been used for last 1,000+ years to insert Adhika masa. I will briefly mention some additional methods that might have been used in antiquity, in Indian civilization's antiquity, to insert the Adhika masa. And then while we are on that subject, I will also discuss how the determination of Adhika Tithi, Adhika Nakshatra, Kshaya Tithi, and Kshaya Nakshatra is determined.